Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Dear Masuma with myself, Sana Araji and Masuma Jaffar. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Now you'll be joining us for another show where we get to discuss your worries and concerns that you may face. And we have a viewer who sent you a letter saying, Dear Masuma, I'm having some problems with a particular individual in the community. This person is new to the community and a revert. They don't seem to understand certain customs that are appropriate, and this has made it difficult for that individual to form friendships and attachments. The problem is their manners and general conduct, such as table, eating manners, abruptness, rudeness, possibly too much honesty, and a general lack of care for others' feelings. And a lot of attention seeking in public often erupts as well. Is it un-Islamic of me to avoid this person? I almost don't have the energy, and as much as I don't want them to leave Islam, I find it impossible to control this individual due to their actions and possibly certain mental health issues that they may have. Do you suggest any specific course of action? I genuinely am very worried for this particular individual and I want what's best for them. Yeah, so that's a big one, yeah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think there's a lot of things that I would ask this person to reflect on before I even go into the revert's actions and way of behaviour. One of the things is he talks about that they don't seem to understand certain customs that are appropriate. Who decides what's appropriate and not? You know, where is this appropriateness coming from? Is it based on Islam or is it based on culture? This person's a revert, so they probably don't know the cultural background and the cultural way of behaving in this environment. And maybe a lot of what they feel is abrupt and rude may be coming from the fact that they're not following the cultural norms. And I think it's really important to identify what Islam says and what culture says.
Yeah.
I'll give you a simple example. You know, in some cultures, if you finish everything that's on your plate, they will take it as you enjoyed the food, and they would take it as a good thing. In other cultures, if you finish everything that's on your plate and not leave anything behind, they would look at that as very rude, as if you're telling them that there wasn't enough food. And that's why you had to eat every single thing that was on your plate. Right. So the same action is considered as appropriate and good in one culture and inappropriate and bad in another culture. But it's the same action. What does Islam say? Islam says not to do israf, not to leave behind food, and not, you know, so it's again looking at what Islam says. Culture is, I'm not saying culture is a bad thing, there's a lot of good in culture. But I think it's when we get caught up in culture and the culture overtakes what Islam says, that's when there's a problem. This person is reverted to Islam. They want to know what God is telling them, how to submit to His will, not necessarily submit to the will of the people and what they find comfortable and uncomfortable.
Very true, yeah.
So I think that's a really, really important one. Secondly, she talks about possibly too much honesty and a great lack of care for others' feelings, and a lot of attention seeking in public often erupts as well.
It's tricky, this one, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't think honesty is a bad thing. It's how it's put across.
Yeah.
So maybe rather than too much honesty, maybe this person's talking about not enough respect, or the way that this person is putting it across. So maybe having conversations with this person where they trying to get them to understand from an Islamic perspective that what respect is, and how respect is a very subjective thing, and it's the person that you're talking to whether they feel respected or not. So one of the things I used to tell my children is that God has told you to respect me as a mother. You don't have a choice in that. That is God's laws. He's told you have to respect me. You can't decide whether whether I feel respected or not. That's my feeling. So if I'm telling you something is making me feel disrespected, then you can't do that, even if you don't see why it should make me feel disrespected. Does that make sense? So for example, my son would say something, and it wasn't the volume of his speech, it was the tone.
Okay,
so I would say to him, because he'd say to me, but I'm not shouting at you, I'm talking to you. And I said, it's not how loud you're saying it, it's the tone that you're using, which I find disrespectful. And to him, he couldn't see that. And I actually had to sit him down and explain to him that it's what I feel is disrespect, is what you have to, especially if I'm telling you I find this disrespectful, then you have to take that on board and not do it. Because God says you have to respect me, and respect is subjective.
Of course, yeah.
So again, explaining to this revert that although you don't think this is disrespectful, other people may see it as disrespectful, and God says you have to respect other Muslims.
So you have to be mindful of
how other people are perceiving
Yeah.
it rather than how you're perceiving it.
That's a good way of saying it without saying to them what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah, or telling them you have to do what is culturally accepted, because they may turn around and say, but I didn't take on your culture, I took on Islam.
Yeah, which is true.
Yeah.
You know, if you think of it, it is true. But yeah, I guess.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I think also making 70 excuses. You know, there's a beautiful hadith by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, where he says when someone says something to you, think of 70 reasons why they may have said or done what they did before you start blaming them. So how many excuses have you given this revert before you start attacking them to a certain extent? And I think also we would never, I can never truly understand what it feels like to be a revert. You know, alhamdulillah, I was born into Islam, I was born into a Shia family, I had it all handed to me on a platter. For someone who has had to find it and change their whole life, give up so much, am I even aware of that? It's like, I think the thing that maybe I could relate to a certain extent would be when I, you know, when I get married and I have to leave behind my friend and my family and maybe move to another country because my husband may be from another country or something like that. But even then I still have contact with my friends and my family back home. A revert may be totally cut off.
Exactly.
You know, it's like their family may totally cut them off, their friends, their lifestyle, what they used to do, where they used to go, everything changes. And if we as Muslims don't make them feel like they belong, then are we not doing a huge disservice to them?
Yeah.
It's like they've given up everything to become part of the Muslim family, and this is how I treat my brother or sister in faith. How is that okay?
We do, like you said, we need to embrace them, and we need to accept some of their faults because they were not born into it. People who are born into Islam have faults in them, have table manners faults, or can be disrespectful, let alone someone who's reverted. So I think we need to be a bit more lenient and not have expectations for them to be the same as us, because like you said, it's the ultimate sacrifice. If someone was to say to you, go and leave your whole religion, go and convert, you'll lose your family, your friends, you're literally on your own. Yeah, it's a completely different situation.
It's
so
huge. I don't think we acknowledge how huge it is for them to have made that transition. It's you know, it is. I don't know whether I would have it in me to have made that transition, and maybe that's why God chose to make me, you know, be born into a Muslim family. Because maybe I would not have had that strength. But the fact that they've done that, and you know, for me to acknowledge that and be part of that journey just by being there for them.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be amazing, you know, and also looking at it from the perspective of what's God trying to teach me. I think a lot of the times when we have interaction with other people, we look at the other person and what they need to do and how they need to better themselves and what's wrong with them, rather than looking at my own self and what I need to do and how I need to better myself and what's wrong with me. I truly believe that there's no randomness in His universe. I feel that every single person that we come across and we meet, there is something for me to learn and gain and grow from that interaction. So if this person actually took a step back and thought to themselves, okay, this is bugging me, this is irritating me, this is annoying me, why? what do I need to learn? What do I need to do differently? How can this interaction better me as a person? How can I get closer to God from this interaction? Then I will look at it with a different lens. And I'll actually look at it from the perspective of what's wrong with me rather than what's wrong with them. And I think that is much more powerful, because I can change myself, I can't change others. So she actually talks about, I find it impossible to control this individual. You can't control another human being. You know, we find it difficult enough trying to control our children when they're young, when they're babies. You know, even when they're babies, we can't control them. You can't control when they decide to want to have a feed, or, you know, want to have a nappy. You can't control another human being. You know, so why not just concentrate on yourself and control yourself, control your emotions, control the way you're feeling, control the way that you're thinking. Again, these are things that we can control, which we don't, because we think we can't control. We let our minds, you know, run off and think what they want to think. We let our emotions take control of us. Why don't we actually take a step back and think, hang on a minute, just like I control my limbs, and, you know, I can control my mind and the way I think. I can control my emotions and the way I feel. So I choose to like this person. In fact, it's an obligation for me to like this person and love this person, because they've become a Muslim. So therefore I cannot hate another Muslim. So therefore I have to love this human being, because now they're part of the Muslim family. So I choose to love this person. My thinking would be positive towards this person instead of negative. So I'm actually controlling my negative thinking and making it into positive. And maybe actually thinking, okay, maybe some of the things that I need to learn, and again, I don't know this person, so I'm not making any assumptions, but I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe they're very culturally based, and maybe God has sent this person into their life to sort of try to figure out the difference between culture and Islam. Maybe they need to be a little bit more patient. So God has sent this person in their life to sort of see if they can grow on their patience. Maybe they need to be less judgmental. Maybe, and I know I'm talking about all the negative things, but it's when you recognize the negative things that you have in yourself, then you can grow positively. So I'm not saying this person is judgmental or not patient, or what I'm saying is they need to look at what faults they have within themselves. They need to reflect on their own self and see then how they can grow from that. So rather than focusing on the other person, focus on themselves when they're reflecting on the interaction that they're having with that person. And when they want to help that person rather than control that person, they need to come from an Islamic perspective rather than a culture perspective. So even when they're looking at table manners, when they're looking at how they interact with other people, when they're talking, looking at whether this person's being too honest, they can bring in respect from an Islamic perspective. And the fact that Islam gives respect to elders, it's not something that they have to earn, but you have to respect your elders. You have to respect your parents. It's not something that they have to earn again. It's something that is given to them by God. So, getting them to understand it from an Islamic perspective, we'll want the revert to want to take all those things on board, because obviously as a revert, they want to become more and more submissive to God. Of course,
yeah. And role modeling it to them as well, because just like you have a child, consider a revert as a newborn. Yeah. This is how I see it with my revert friends. I would say they're newborn, and how we would role model with our children to be good Muslims, practicing Muslims, guiding them, not giving up on them, is the same duty we have on our revert brothers and sisters.
For sure.
I feel like they get so much slack, and it's really unfair. And I feel like we sometimes need to consider all of those factors that they go through, and understand that if we don't do that, then we can drive them completely away from Islam. Yeah. And then who has that blame upon them? Is that upon you because you've done that? Is it on the community? Is it on, who has that blame? Because they're trying to reach out. They're struggling by showing you these attributes. They're obviously struggling and they want to learn, but don't just cut them off.
No, for sure. I think we need to be a lot more patient, a lot more loving, a lot less holier than thou, a lot less sort of judgmental, and just come from a place of love. Yeah. I think that's what's important, to actually come from a place of love.
And with with this, individual said they're very, very kind of worried and concerned. Do they just ignore them and kind of cut themselves off of them? So, for example, if they were in a majalis or something, would just ignoring them or not sitting next to them do any good?
I think that's very un-Islamic, and she actually says, is it un-Islamic of me to avoid this person?
Yeah.
I think, again, recognizing that once a person becomes a Muslim, they become part of your family. You wouldn't ignore your family, no matter what they did to you. You wouldn't just avoid them, you wouldn't just ignore them. So there is a right due on them. Making them feel accepted, making them feel loved is really, really important. So it's, again, she says, I almost don't have the energy as much as I don't want them to leave Islam. So it's about recognizing maybe a lot of the energy is used in the emotions that she feels, or the negative emotions, because when you have positive emotions, you don't feel sort of worn down. You feel very worn down when you have a lot of negative emotions. So it's recognizing that and sort of, again, choosing to have positive emotions, choosing to have positive thoughts, coming from a place of love. She won't feel so drained when she's interacting with this revert, or he, whoever it is, won't feel so drained when they're interacting with this revert. Sort of being open and honest with the revert, sort of again explaining to them that, okay, this is how we do it culturally, but there's Islam in there as well, and this is how Islam comes into it. And maybe actually sort of listening to them, because again, they're looking at it from the outside, so maybe they can see things that are happening within our community which we've just accepted because we've been born into that community. Maybe they might be able to open my eyes into something that I'd never even thought of, or even, would have even reflected on. So there is a reason this person has been brought into my life. And it's recognizing that and accepting that and being open to that will give me so much more growth in myself. And when I see the growth in myself, that will energize me as well. So I think all of these things are really important. One of the other things that this person mentions is that they think possibly this revert may have certain mental health issues. I think that's a very dangerous statement. What are you basing that on? Do you have some sort of psychological background, some counselling background, some medical background? Or is it just because they're not behaving in the way that you see as appropriate, therefore it must be down to mental health? It's a very huge statement to make without any evidence. So I think if you're going to make some sort of statement like that, you need to back it up with evidence. And if you can back it up with evidence, then it's even more important that you're there for them and then help them to find the right kind of professional help that they need, rather than avoiding them and letting them be. So either way, you need to be there, either not judging them and not making statements which you can't back with evidence, or if you can back it up with evidence, then be there for them and help them find the right help that they need.
Of course. And even if they, say for example, if they did decide they wanted to distance themselves from this individual, they could do it in a respectful way without causing any problems. Like they could just perhaps reduce the amount they message or speak on the phone, or without making that person feel that they're doing it. So if this individual does feel that they can't, they've got too much on their plate, they might have children, they might have other issues, and they think, you know what, I mentally am exhausted, I actually can't take on the role to be a role model for that individual. I guess in a way they also do have a right to kind of slightly back away if they feel it's affecting their own, perhaps, mental health.
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, I think it's recognizing that God is in control, and there's no randomness in his universe. So the fact that he's brought this person into your life at this time means that you can learn something from this person, you have the ability to grow from this interaction, but you may choose not to take that opportunity.
Exactly,
and that's your choice, and you're not going to get punished for that. So you do have the right to say, you know what, at this moment, although God knows I can, I don't know I can, and therefore I'm not willing to take this step. And then, yes, do it in a respectful manner so that this person doesn't feel like you're just cutting them off totally and, or you're being rude to them. But I think I would say think about why God has brought this person specifically into your life at this time.
Yeah, it's your own personal test and journey.
Yeah. And you know, He gives you the tools to handle anything that life throws at you. So even if it's not directly from God, if something happens due to the free will of mankind, so say if this person says something to you which would be quite hurtful or something like that, which is through their own free will and free choice, God would give you the tools to be able to handle that. So again, using the tools that God gives you will also bring growth within yourself.
Yeah.
Recognizing that God doesn't abandon us, and whatever life throws at us, God gives us the tools to be able to behave and interact and in the right way, which would be the best way for me to grow closer to God through that.
Yeah, no, of course. And one final question I was going to ask, should the community also play a role, instead of it being on one individual person, should the community also take some of the burden of that one individual to help this revert to kind of overcome or deal with the issues that this person is claiming?
No, for sure. I think as a community you have to work together, but the community is made up of individuals. So each individual has to play a role as well. And that's why it's important that this person plays their role. But as a community, I think there's lots that we can do. So I think just recently we had a session in our community where we had a few reverts come in and talk about their journey, which actually made us recognize what they'd gone through. So although you can never truly understand it, at least you can sort of empathize to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And it makes you appreciate what they've been through to get to where they are. And it was beautiful. And you know, a lot of the times, you know, some of the things that they said, you're just like, wow, I would never have thought of it like that. Or they'd give an example of something that happened, which which I would have thought would be totally normal, but they'd seen it a different way because they'd come at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So again, the community needs to organize things like this, where then we become a lot more aware of how other people are feeling and thinking, and giving maybe reverts a chance to actually say what they want instead of us assuming what they want.
Yeah,
is quite important as well. Having sort of informal discussions, having sessions, having workshops would be on the community level. Having majalises in English, again, it's from a community level, because it's not just for our children, because our children may know our language, maybe not to the level that we want them to, but they would still be able to get away with taking bits and pieces, whereas a revert would not know the language at all.
Exactly.
So having a common language which is easy for everyone to access, having classes where the Quran is taught, Salah, again, because where will they go?
This is
where will they learn Islam from? So instead of just sort of leaving it up to one individual to teach, there should be something that the community organizes. And again, that would come from the reverts telling the community what they need.
Yeah.
So again, giving the confidence to the revert to actually say what they require and what they need, or having somewhere where they can go to actually ask for what they need. Maybe have some sort of suggestion box so it can be done anonymously.
Yeah.
There's so many things that the community as a group can do, but I think communities are made up of individuals, so we have to think about me as an individual, what can I do? And then as a community member, what can I do as well?
Yeah, definitely, because we all need to feel included, no matter where you're from. Like with me, I'm a convert from Sunni to Shia, which is a bit different. But still, you still need to feel. Yeah, you still need to feel that you're accepted within wherever you go. Definitely. But thank you so much for that, Masuma. I think we went into that quite a lot, and it was quite nice to discuss those areas. And I do hope that we've helped this dear viewer and also reverts who may be listening to this as well, so that they can understand from both sides of the the argument. And inshallah you can join us again for another episode of Dear Masuma. Please feel free to send us your queries and worries, and we will again put it forward to Masuma, who will answer your questions to the best of her ability. Thank you so much, and inshallah we'll see you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.